The early years, raising the regiment and the first battle honour. The Saltire is important to both nation and regiment. It is the flag of Scotland and the basis of the Union flag. It is on the soldier's cap badge, along with our patron St Andrew. Three other badges are equally important. The Royal Cipher within the collar of the Order of the Thistle is the regimental badge and signifies our status as the Royal Regiment. And the Star of the Order of the Thistle, worn by officers, sergeant majors and colour sergeants, the cap badge. The crown and one symbolising our position as the Royal Regiment and the 1st Regiment of Foot. Examples of badges can be seen immediately inside the museum. The origin of the Saltire as our national flag is based on the legend that it appeared in the sky by a trick of sunlight and cloud on the eve of battle between Picts and Angles in the year 832 at Athelstonford in East Lothian as a portent of victory. The Saltire formed our earliest standard or colour along with the motto of Scotland, Nemo meum puni licet. Famously, the colour was saved from capture at the Battle of Steenkirk in 1692 by Colonel Sir Robert Douglas, but at the cost of his life. Colours became more formalised over the years, but the original design remained in service as the commanding officer's pennant. It was most recently flown in battle during the liberation of Kuwait in 1991 by Lieutenant Colonel Ian Johnson on his Warrior armoured vehicle. A number of colours are displayed in the museum. Athelstonford or Elsternford is also the birthplace of the founder of our regiment, and arguably of the British Army as we know it. John Hepburn grew up on a small holding there and studied at the high school in Haddington, where he won a scholarship to St Andrews University. Opportunity to study abroad took him to Poitiers in France, where he met fellow countrymen, Scots mercenaries of Louis XIII's bodyguard. The life of a soldier beckoned, and Hepburn left university to join them. Hepburn returned to Elsternford and the poverty there and told his brothers, "You run the farm, I've been living in the court of the King of France. I'm awa for a sojourn." Hepburn knew that rulers on the continent were recruiting mercenary soldiers from Scotland, where so widespread was poverty, many young men were enlisting abroad. He mustered a body of men, some probably imprisoned in the toll booth which once stood beside St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh's High Street, marched them to the port of Leith, which can be seen from the castle battlements, and took passage to Europe. He soon found himself in the service of King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden in the 30 Years' War, and grew his platoon of 30 into a company of 100, then to a regiment of 500. By 1625 he was commanding the Green Brigade, so called because of the green sashes they wore to distinguish them from other formations. Hepburn became one of Gustav Adolphus's most successful and trusted generals, for which he was knighted. On returning to Scotland in 1633, Hepburn was summoned to London by the King, and on the 28th of March, in the banqueting house in Whitehall, Charles I issued him with a royal warrant to raise a regiment of 1,200 Scotsmen from all the kingdom, thus forming the first and the most senior infantry regiment of the British Army. A transcript of Sir John's contract with Louis XIII is in the museum archive. A copy of a portrait of Sir John, attributed to Daniel Mytens around 1630, is in the first case on the left inside the museum. Charles I recognised Sir John's soldierly qualities, but was short of funds and immediately hired out the newly formed Hepburn's regiment to the King of France, where it remained for 30 years. On returning to Britain, it formally entered the British Army establishment. Originally, the regiment was known as the Regiment de Hebron, and then by the name of subsequent colonels. Sadly, Sir John survived for only another 3 years before being killed while leading a reconnaissance at the siege of Sauvergne. John Hebron, of humble origins in Scotland, is interred in Toul Cathedral in France. Sir John Hebron, a Marshal of France, having raised the Royal Scots, Scotland's and the British Army's 1st and Royal Regiment of Foot, standing in the place of honour at the right of the line. The regiment has another title, or rather a nickname, that survives today. It stems from the early days in France, while brigaded with Le Regiment de Picardy, which claimed its ancestry from the Roman legion that garrisoned Jerusalem at the time of the crucifixion. At issue was a Picardy sentry falling asleep on duty, which caused one of Hebron's men to declare that, had his regiment been guarding the sepulchre, the sentries would not have fallen asleep, thus preventing the angels from rolling away the stone that entombed Jesus. This caused the French to refer to their Scots comrades as Pontius Pilate's bodyguard, making reference to the legend that Pontius Pilate was born at Fortingall in Perthshire, Scott's mother. The original cartoon by E.V. Powell in 1931 is in the first case on the left inside the museum. But not only were we the first regiment to be raised, we also gained the Army's first battle honour, Tangier 1680, shared with the 2nd Regiment of Foot, the Surrey Regiment, and the Coldstream Guards. Tangier 1680 was gained while ejecting the Moors from the port which had been part of the dowry of Catherine of Braganza, wife of King Charles II. It is from a contemporary painting that we know that the regiment had a body of pipers, some years before any other Scottish regiments were raised. This spectacular item of silver, commissioned in 1890, formed the centrepiece of the silver of the 1st Battalion, the Royal Scots, the Royal Regiment. It was passed into the stewardship of their successors, the Royal Scots Borderers, 1st Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland, in 2006. On top is Colonel Sir Robert Douglas saving the colour at Steenkirk in 1692. To the right is a 1685 musketeer of the then Royal Regiment. In front is a 1625 pikeman of Sir John Hebron's Green Brigade in the service of Gustavus Adolphus. To the left is a sergeant of 1813, 2 years prior to the Battle of Waterloo. To the rear is a soldier of 1742. Other items of silver are displayed at the back of the museum beside the medal cases. Further reading is on the regimental website.